The words came out of the doorway of Bay 4 at Aldergate Regional Medical Center in Kingsbridge, Massachusetts, at 12 minutes past 6 on a Tuesday morning, and they were loud enough that the unit clerk 40 feet down the hall stopped typing. Inside the bay, a woman in navy scrubs held a plastic pill organizer in one hand and a printed medication list in the other. Rasha Tarabishi had been on shift for 11 hours and 40 minutes, explaining patiently and for the third time why the little white tablet in the Thursday slot could not go back into Walter Ferrier's mouth until the bleeding in his stomach stopped. Walter was 78. He had come in at 2 in the morning with black stool and a blood pressure that made the triage nurse call for help before she finished the vitals. His daughter Colleen had driven in from Worcester in a raincoat thrown over pyjamas and had not sat down once. "So he just stops taking it," Colleen said. "For now. Only for now," Rasha said. "The medicine keeps clots from forming in his heart, but it also keeps his stomach from closing the leak. So we stop it, we fix the leak, we start it again when it is safe. The doctor will tell you the same thing at 8. Colleen let out a breath she had been holding since Worcester. That was when the doorway spoke. The man in the doorway wore a charcoal overcoat, and behind him were 2 younger people in quarter-zip vests with clipboards. He was Bram Ostrander. He chaired the Finance and Operations Committee of the Aldergate Foundation. He owned a supply chain company with a warehouse the size of an airfield out past Route 12, and once a month he walked the hospital at 6 in the morning with consultants, counting what he called friction. Ostrander leaned in and read the badge clipped to the navy scrubs. "Tarabishi," he said. "Tarabishi," Rasha said. He turned to the assistant director without lowering his voice at all. "This is exactly the thing I flagged in September. Family communication. You've got a man's daughter standing in a hallway trying to decode an accent at 6 in the morning." Colleen Ferrier's chin came up. "I understood her fine. I'm sure she's very kind," Ostrander said, and he smiled at Colleen the way a man smiles at a dog he does not intend to pet. "Get her a supervisor," he told the assistant director, and he walked on toward the trauma bays, and the consultants walked after him, and one of them wrote something down. Teddy Vrabel came around the corner 90 seconds later, with her reading glasses shoved up into her grey hair. "Colleen Ferrier is out there telling the clerk she wants to file something," Teddy said. Rasha capped her pen. "Mr. Ferrier needs a repeat hemoglobin at 7, and he is going to ask you for coffee. He will be charming about it." She finished her charting at 7:04. Beside her signature on the last note, she drew a tiny lamp, the way she had drawn one on every chart she had signed for 20 years, and then she walked out into a parking lot that smelled like cold asphalt and salt. Rasha Tarabishi had not always been a night shift nurse in a New England city of 90,000 people. She grew up in an apartment above her father's pharmacy, where her mother repainted the hand-painted mortar and pestle on the sign every spring, and where she learned early that the person on the other side of a counter is never really asking about the medicine. They are asking whether they are going to be all right. She was accepted to medical school at 20. She chose surgery because the first time she put her hands inside a living person, the shaking she had carried since childhood stopped completely, and she wanted to know why. Her teacher was a man named Adib Salul. He was small and stooped and permanently annoyed, and he wore a cardigan under his scrubs even in August. He taught by insult and by hand. He would say her knots were an embarrassment to the concept of knots, and then he would take her wrists and move them, twice, slowly, and she would never tie it wrong again. By the time the war closed around the eastern half of the city, Salul was 63 and Rasha was 33, and the hospital where they had both trained had a hole in the 4th floor you could see the sky through. They moved the surgical service into the basement of a shuttered textile mill. The tables were sewing benches with the machines unbolted and taken out. The lights were 2 work lamps and 11 headlamps, and, on the days the generator was dry, whatever came through the ventilation grate at street level. They boiled instruments in a pressure cooker on a camp stove and kept the sterile field on trays covered in cloth that women in the building above washed and ironed and brought down the stairs, still warm. On the fourth night, the generator failed in the middle of a splenectomy. The room went absolutely black except for Salul's headlamp, which was on its last battery and the colour of weak tea. And, Salul said, without lifting his head, "You don't wait for better light." She finished that operation by headlamp, with an assistant holding a phone screen over the field. The patient lived and came back 3 months later with a bag of dried figs and no way to say thank you that wasn't crying. Salul had one more habit that Rasha took from him. Every triage tag that came off their table he marked in the corner with a tiny drawing of an oil lamp, 3 strokes and a flame, so that whoever unfolded that tag at another clinic or another border would know a real surgeon had put hands in that abdomen and that the packing inside had a reason and a clock. It was not a signature. Salul hated signatures. It was a message from one pair of hands to the next. In the last week of the siege, Rasha did 41 operations in 6 days. Salul was 30 years older and did the same and never complained once. And on the 7th day, he went upstairs to argue with a supply driver, and the building across the street came apart, and so did he. She kept working 11 more months. Then a corridor opened, and she went out of the country in the back of a truck with her daughter Hala, asleep against her ribs, and a plastic sleeve of documents inside her shirt, her medical degree, her surgical board certificate, and a photograph of her mother repainting the pharmacy sign. Those documents were why she was calm at the airport in the United States 18 months later, and they were also why she cried in a parking lot in Kingsbridge 4 months after that. Because in America, the documents were paper. To practice as a surgeon, she would need credentials verified by a body that could not reach the university that issued them, because the registrar's office had been shelled. She would need 3 examinations that cost more than her rent, and then a residency at the bottom, as a first year, at 39, in a match that quietly and consistently does not choose people like her. She looked at that road for 1 winter. Then she looked at Hala, who was 14 and needed shoes and braces, and a mother who came home. So Rasha Tarabishi took the nursing pathway. 2 years of prerequisites, a bridge program at the community college, the licensure exam on a Saturday morning in a testing centre that smelled like carpet glue. She passed on the first attempt, and Aldergate Regional hired her onto nights in the spring of 2020, which was, as Teddy Vrabel liked to say, a hell of a time to start. She was extraordinary, and everyone in the department knew it, in the way departments know things without ever writing them down. New residents learned within a month that if the compact woman in the grey fleece said quietly, "At your elbow, I would look at the abdomen again," you looked at the abdomen again. What she was, officially, on paper, in the system that mattered, was a registered nurse, grade 3, night differential. She never told anyone at Aldergate what she had been, not out of shame. The first 2 times she said it out loud in America, the person she said it to got a strange, pained, embarrassed look, as if she had confessed to being royalty from a country that no longer existed. So she stopped. She wore the lamp charm on her lanyard, drew the lamp on her charts, and let that be enough. For 6 years, it was enough. 9 days after Bram Ostrander stood in the doorway of Bay 4, Rasha was called to conference room 2B at the end of a night shift. There were 4 people at the table. Dale Fenneman from Human Resources sat behind a laptop covered in sticky notes. A woman from Patient Experience sat with a folder she did not open. Ostrander sat at the head, and he was the only one of the 4 who was not tired. "Sit down, Rasha," Fenneman said. She sat. It was disciplinary. They had built it out of the Ferrier complaint, which said in 3 handwritten paragraphs that a board member had been rude to a nurse who deserved a raise. Somewhere between the mailroom and conference room 2B, that had become a document titled Patient Communication Concern, Provider Side. "We're launching a communication competency review," Fenneman said. "You'll be enrolled in a 12-week Clarity coaching series. It's on your own time." He looked at his laptop rather than at her. The woman from Patient Experience made a small noise and turned it into a cough. Ostrander spoke for the first time. He slid a printed page across the table. It was a section of his operations plan, the one the board had approved in September under the heading Workforce Optimization, and someone had highlighted line item 19 in yellow. Line item 19 retired the extended practice sonography pilot. Rasha read it twice. The pilot was 4 years old. It had trained 11 experienced emergency nurses to perform the 4-view screening scan that tells you in 90 seconds whether there is blood loose in a belly, because Aldergate was a level 2 centre with one in-house surgeon overnight. It had a policy number CL4419, a credentialing checklist and a signature page. Rasha had been in the first cohort. She had done 306 documented scans and had taught the last 2 cohorts herself. "You're cutting it," she said. "I'm retiring it," Ostrander said. "It's redundant capability. We pay physicians to interpret imaging. In the last 2 years, the pilot found free fluid in 11 patients before a physician was at the bedside. I have it in the log." He capped his pen. "You're also coming off the trauma response team while the communication review is open. That's not punitive." She sat there for a moment. Down the hall, a call bell was going off, and no one at the table but Rasha heard it as a sound with a person on the other end of it. She said. Ostrander glanced at Fenneman. Fenneman said, "Retired policies are archived. The document control system." "Thank you," Rasha said. "I am chopping like an adult," Rasha said, and then, after a while, "You don't wait for better light." The donor gala was on the 3rd Saturday in October, in the atrium of the new trauma pavilion, which was 2 months from opening and still smelled like sealant. 400 people, a string trio, a videographer with a shoulder rig. 12 staff members had been invited as honorees. Rasha was one of them, and she had not wanted to go, and Teddy Vrabel had told her that not going was the same as agreeing with them, which was not true but worked. She wore a dark green dress she had bought in 2018, and a pair of shoes that hurt. At 8:40, a woman named Dorothy Kinlaw came to the microphone. Dorothy was 66 and had come through the doors 11 months earlier with an aortic dissection that began at a farmer's market in front of her grandson. She had rehearsed her remarks. She got through 8 seconds of them. Then she stopped, looked out over 400 people and said, "I'm sorry. I have to say one more thing. There was a nurse. She held my hand in the hallway and told me, 'Dorothy, look at me. We are not going to lose you tonight.' And I believed her, and I stopped fighting the mask, and that's why the surgeon had a patient to work on at 4 in the morning. Her name is Rasha." 400 people turned. Somebody started clapping, and then everybody did. Rasha stood, because standing was the only thing to do, and she put her hand flat against her sternum and inclined her head, and she felt her face go hot, and she sat down. Bram Ostrander took the microphone next. He had a lapel mic clipped on for the video, and the videographer was recording, and the soundboard was recording, because the foundation paid $11,000 for a highlight reel every year. "Beautiful," Ostrander said. "Thank you, Dorothy, and I want to be clear about something, because I think we get soft at these things. The nurses are wonderful, truly, but this pavilion is not going to be built by wonderful. It's going to be built by surgeons, by systems, and by the 8 people in this room who wrote checks with 6 figures on them." Applaud the hands. There was a beat of silence with a shape to it. Then the applause came, because it always does. Rasha found her coat at 9:20. The coat check was a folding table behind a partition near the loading corridor, staffed by a kid from the volunteer program. The videographer was on the other side of the partition, packing a bag, with his transmitter still hot because he had not yet collected the lapel mics. Ostrander came around the partition with a glass in his hand. "Nurse Tarabishi," he said, and the name came out correctly, which somehow made it worse. Mr. It was Dorothy's moment. "No," he said. He swirled the glass. "Let me give you some advice, since apparently nobody here will. You're a very good pair of hands, and you have decided that makes you a stakeholder. It doesn't. You are unhappy here." "I am not unhappy." He leaned in 6 inches. "Go back home, Rasha. I mean that generously. Go somewhere they'll be grateful." The coat check kid froze with a hanger in his hand. Rasha Tarabishi looked at him for a long moment. She had seen a great many men be certain about things, some of them while holding a rifle, and she had learned that the only thing certainty responds to is time. "Thank you for the advice," she said. "Good night, Mr. Grains." She took her coat. The videographer, on the other side of the partition, was looking at his levels with an expression that would matter enormously in 11 weeks. The night that ended it was November 2nd, a Sunday going into a Monday, wet and 38 degrees. The radio call came in, single vehicle into a utility pole on Route 12, unrestrained driver, 19-year-old male, extrication 4 minutes, hypotensive in the field. Teddy Vrabel took the phone. Rasha was in Bay 9 restarting a line on a man with pancreatitis, and she came out with her gloves still on. "You're not on trauma team," Teddy said. "I am on the floor," Rasha said. Gilman Roth was a locum. He was in his 4th week at Aldergate covering a maternity leave, and he was neither lazy nor stupid. He was cautious in the particular way of a physician who has been sued once and has decided the answer is more imaging. The kid came through the doors at 3:14. Devon Pruitt, 19, with a diagonal purple line across his lower abdomen where a lap belt would have been if he had been wearing one, which meant he had gone into the wheel. Heart rate 132, pressure 84/50. Awake, talking, apologizing. "Sorry," Devon kept saying. "Sorry, 2 large bore lines, labs." Roth did his exam, methodical, unhurried, and stood up. "Belly's soft," he said. "He's tender, but he's got a normal exam. Let's get a pan scan and see what we're dealing with." He is 19. He has a heart rate of 132 and a pressure that has come down 11 points in 8 minutes, and he has a seatbelt sign without a seatbelt. His abdomen is soft because he is 19, and his abdominal wall is a trampoline. Roth looked at her, not unkindly. The scanner is at the end of the hall. She had the ultrasound machine at the foot of the bed already. She had turned it on when the radio call came in, the way she had turned it on for 6 years. Nobody stopped her, because everyone in that room had watched her do it 40 times. Probe to the right flank, gel cold. She angled up under the ribs, and there it was, in the space between the liver and the kidney where nothing should be, a black stripe, wide, absolutely unmistakable. She turned the screen. "Free fluid at Morrison's pouch," she said. She swept down. And there. Roth looked at the screen for 4 seconds. Then he was a different man, which is the thing Rasha would say about him afterward whenever anybody wanted her to say something cruel. "Activate massive transfusion," Roth said. "Get me an OR, now." Devon Pruitt was in the operating room at 3:31. There were 2.4 litres of blood in his abdomen and a grade 4 laceration of the spleen. Roth took the spleen out, packed the liver bed, closed him temporarily at 5:02 and came back down to the emergency department at 5:40 with his cap still in his hand. "That was a good call," he said. "It was a good machine," Rasha said. "Don't do that. I was going to put him in the scanner." Roth was a careful man, and careful men document things, saying that a nursing staff member had performed a point-of-care ultrasound and communicated a finding that redirected the management of a trauma patient, and that he wished to confirm the scope of practice framework under which this had occurred, as he was new to the institution. It was, honestly, a fair note. Man Tarabishi. By Thursday, Rasha Tarabishi had been suspended without pay pending investigation. By the following Wednesday, the letter came, termination, effective immediately, for practicing outside the scope of licensure, insubordination, and creating institutional liability. Security walked her to her car. The guard was a man named Ernesto who had eaten her lentil soup at 4 holiday potlucks, and he cried, and she ended up comforting him in the parking lot with her hand on his shoulder. Teddy Vrabel called her at 11 that night. "You're appealing," Teddy said. "Rasha." "Yes," Rasha said, after a while. The Aldergate Ethics and Appeals Panel met in the boardroom on the 4th floor on a Thursday in January at 9 in the morning. It had 4 members. One was the Chief Nursing Officer, Naomi Okafor, who had been at the hospital 9 months, had already fired 2 managers, and read everything. The chair was the community member, a retired Superior Court judge named Beatriz Souza, who had a way of taking her glasses off that made attorneys sit down. Bram Ostrander was not a member of the panel. He attended as the sponsor of the administrative action, which entitled him to a chair at the end of the table and, in practice, to whatever he wanted. Rasha sat on the other side with a union representative, a thin manila folder, and a lawyer who had 11 other cases that month. "This is not a courtroom," Judge Souza said at the start. "It is not a trial. I have found over 11 years that people are calmer when I say that, and then behave exactly as though it were a trial anyway." The administration went first. Fenneman read the findings, and on its face the argument was devastating. Nurses at Aldergate were not authorized to perform or interpret diagnostic imaging, and no such privilege existed in the current clinical manual. He had printed the manual. It sat on the table in a black binder with the tab marked, "Miss Tarabishi," Judge Souza said. Rasha stood, her lawyer touched her sleeve, and she sat back down, because apparently one did not stand. On November 3, she said, "I identified free intraperitoneal fluid, and I reported it to the attending surgeon. I did not diagnose, and I did not direct treatment." "Yes," Rasha said. "It was retired on September 19th. The scan was performed on November 3rd, and the policy specified that credentials granted under it remain valid until the end of the holder's 2-year certification cycle, and that retirement of the program does not retroactively void issued credentials." Section 7. There was a pause in the room of a very particular quality. "You have the archived policy," Judge Souza said. "I requested it from Document Control in November. It took 6 weeks." Rasha opened the manila folder and slid 3 stapled copies down the table. "My certification is current through next March. It is on the 2nd page." Naomi Okafor turned to the 4th page. She looked at it for about 2 seconds longer than reading required. Mr. Ostrander did not move. "You signed this one in April of 2022 as Chair of Operations, approving the credentialing of 11 nurses to perform screening ultrasound." "I signed a pilot. Section 7 says what happens when they end," Okafor said. Judge Souza took her glasses off. "Let's slow down," she said. "Miss Tarabishi, I want to ask you something that is not in the file, and you may decline. The incident report says you told Dr. Roth that a 19-year-old's abdomen would be soft until it wasn't. That is not a nursing observation. That is a surgical one." The room went quiet in the way that rooms do when everyone realizes at the same moment that they have been in a different conversation than the one on the agenda. "It comes from experience," Rasha said. She was quiet for 4 or 5 seconds. "I am a surgeon," she said. "I graduated from medical school in 2004, completed a general surgery residency, and was board certified in my country in 2011. I practiced for 6 years, the last 2 of them in a city under siege, and I have performed approximately 1,400 operations. Between 2015 and 2016, I performed 410 damage control laparotomies in a basement under a textile mill, most of them without imaging, most of them without a blood bank, and many of them without electricity. My credentials cannot be verified in this country because the university that issued them no longer has a registrar's office. Nobody said anything. Then Ostrander laughed. It was one syllable, and it was involuntary, and it was the worst sound anyone in that room had heard in a long time. "Mr. Ostrander," Judge Souza said, "no, I'd like it on the record." "It is not a story," said the union lawyer, who had been asleep at the wheel for 40 minutes and now was not. Exhibit E. Exhibit E was 11 pages photocopied from a journal, in English, a case series of 118 consecutive damage control laparotomies in a besieged city, published in 2017 by an international surgical society. The lead author, listed with an affiliation that no longer existed, was Rasha Tarabishi. "Page 9, the lawyer said. Figure 4 was a photograph. It showed a hand in a bloody glove holding a green field triage tag against a metal tray. On the tag were block letters in blue ink recording an injury pattern, a temporary abdominal closure technique, and a warning in 2 languages that the packs inside the patient's abdomen must not be removed before 48 hours. And in the bottom corner of the tag, tiny, 3 strokes and a flame, someone had drawn a lamp. The technician in the corner put the exhibit up on the wall screen because that was the routine, and the image went up 8 feet wide. Bram Ostrander made a sound. It was not a word. Everybody heard it. He was staring at the screen with his mouth slightly open, and the colour was going out of his face in a way that made the physician on the panel half rise out of his chair. "Mr. Ostrander," Judge Souza said sharply. "Zoom in," Ostrander said. His voice had gone strange and flat. The corner of the tag. The technician zoomed. The lamp filled 2 feet of the wall, blurry, blue, 3 strokes and a flame. "What is that?" Ostrander said. He was not asking the panel. He had turned in his chair, and he was asking Rasha, and his hands were flat on the table on either side of his notepad. "It is a lamp," Rasha said. "My teacher drew one on every tag," she said. His name was Adib Sahlul. He believed that a tag with a lamp on it told the next doctor, wherever the patient ended up, that a trained surgeon had operated in that abdomen and that the packing had a reason and a clock, so that no one would open a belly they did not understand. I drew it on every tag for 2 years. I still draw it on my charts here. Bram Ostrander sat absolutely still for about 6 seconds. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and took out his wallet, and from the billfold he removed something that was folded in half and laminated, and had gone soft and cloudy at the edges from 10 years of body heat. He put it on the table. He pushed it toward the center, and Naomi Okafor picked it up, and even from 6 feet away, Rasha could see the green. "March 14th, 2016, Ostrander said. "About 4 in the morning. I was a regional operations director for a logistics contractor. Nobody in the room moved. There was a mortar, or something, I've never actually known. I remember the sound of the windshield more than the explosion. I woke up on a table with a light in my eyes and a woman shouting numbers over my head in a language I didn't speak, and I remember thinking she was angry at me. I was down there 9 days. He looked at the wall screen. He looked at Rasha. "I have carried that thing in my wallet for 10 years, he said. "I have looked at it probably 1,000 times. I never knew what the little drawing was." Judge Souza said, very quietly, "Mr. No," he said. And then Bram Ostrander stood up in the boardroom of Aldergate Regional Medical Center in front of 9 people and pulled his shirt out of his waistband and unbuttoned it from the bottom and turned to his right. The scar started under his ribs, ran down, and turned at a hard angle toward his flank, an inverted L, ugly and wide and white, the kind of scar you do not see in an American hospital, because no American hospital ever has to close a belly the way that belly had been closed. Along the long limb of it were 4 round, puckered marks, evenly spaced, like the seams of a baseball. "What are those?" Judge Souza said, before she could stop herself. "Retention sutures," Rasha said. Her voice had changed, tied over lengths of intravenous tubing, because we had no bolsters, and the tubing was the only sterile thing that was soft. 4 of them. The angle is not a mistake, it is a decision. If a fragment goes in below the ribs on the right and you open straight down the middle, you cannot see the back of the liver, and you will spend 40 minutes finding out that you should have gone laterally. So you turn the incision. Dr. Salul hated it. Bram Ostrander started buttoning his shirt, badly, with hands that were not working correctly. "March 14th, he said again. "There was a photograph in my pocket. My daughter." Rasha closed her eyes. "You had it in your left breast pocket," she said. "It was wet. Everything was wet. We cut all the clothing off. I gave the photograph to the man helping me, and he did not know what to do with it, and I told him to pin it to the blanket so that when you woke up you would see it before you saw the room, and I told him what to say. Tell him his daughter is waiting." Ostrander's hand went back to his jacket pocket, and it came out with a photograph, 4 inches by 6, creased in a cross where it had been folded twice, and in the top left corner, unmistakable, was a small rusted hole where a pin had gone through it. He set it on the table beside the tag. The room was so quiet you could hear the ventilation. "Your abdomen was packed for 48 hours, Rasha said. "You were reopened on the 3rd day and closed on the 5th. "Every time," Ostrander said. "They ask me who did it," he said. "The surgeons here, they look at the films and they ask me who did the operation, and I have always said, I don't know." "Some field hospital." His voice cracked on the last word, and he stopped, and he put his hand over his mouth for a moment, and then he took it away, because he had decided not to be allowed to hide. "Some doctor," he said. "Yes," Rasha said. "At the gala, in front of a 19-year-old kid with a coat rack." Naomi Okafor said carefully, "Mr. Ostrander, there is an audio exhibit, Exhibit H." "I'm sure you had," Ostrander said. "You don't need to play it. I said it. I remember every word of it, because I was proud of it." Judge Beatriz Souza put her glasses back on, and when she spoke, her voice had the particular even weight of somebody who has spent 30 years making sure that a record says what happened. "Then let me put some things on the record," she said, "and Mr. Fenneman, you will take them down. 1. Ms. Tarabishi held a current valid institutional credential to perform focused sonography at the time of the November 3 incident, under a policy signed by the sponsor of her termination, containing a clause that expressly preserved that credential. The scope of practice finding is not merely unsupported, it is contradicted by the hospital's own document control system. 2. The termination was initiated by a member of this institution's foundation board who had, in the preceding 4 months, publicly disparaged this employee in a clinical area in front of a patient's family, mandated unpaid remediation arising from a complaint that in fact praised her, removed her from a clinical team without written cause, and directed a demeaning statement at her at a fundraising event where he was mic'd. I am not going to characterize that, the record can. 3. On the night in question, Ms. Tarabishi's action moved a hemorrhaging 19-year-old from a corridor to an operating room in 17 minutes. Devon Pruitt is a sophomore at a state university this semester. I looked because I wanted to know what we were talking about. This panel finds the termination improper and orders reinstatement with full back pay, restoration of seniority, expungement of the disciplinary record, and reversal of the communication competency directive. Nobody would like to argue with her. The rest of it was not dramatic, and Rasha would always insist on that, because the dramatic part had already happened, and everything after it was paperwork done by tired adults. Bram Ostrander resigned from the Aldergate Foundation board 11 days later. He did not do it quietly. He wrote a letter and sent it to the local paper as well as to the board, and it did not use the word regret, and it did not use the word unfortunate, and it contained the sentence, "I humiliated a woman in my own hospital for having an accent, and she is the reason I have been alive for 10 years, and I want that written down somewhere that isn't a wallet." The pavilion had been going to carry his name. He asked that it not. His company lost 2 hospital system contracts that spring, and he did not complain publicly. He asked to meet Rasha exactly once, in a diner on Fowler Street, in February. He stood up when she came in, and she told him to sit down, and he sat down. "I've been trying to work out what to say for 6 weeks," he said. "You want to say thank you, and you want it to fix something." So he said it. It took 90 seconds, and it was not eloquent. The Salul Bridge program opened in a converted records office on the ground floor of Aldergate Regional Medical Center 14 months later. The hospital settled with Rasha for $260,000. She took 40 of it to pay Hala's tuition through graduation and put the rest into the program's account. Ostrander redirected $2 million from the pavilion pledge he had made when he still wanted his name on a wall, and the State Hospital Association put in $300,000 after Naomi Okafor spent 4 months making it uncomfortable for them not to. The program does 3 things and does not pretend to do more. It pays the credential verification and examination fees for internationally trained physicians, nurses, midwives, and paramedics in the state, because fees are the single largest reason these people never practice. Not talent, fees. It places them in paid clinical support roles at Aldergate while they test, so nobody is driving for a delivery app at 41 with a surgical board certificate in a drawer, and it gives each of them an advocate to sit beside them in the offices where their documents are examined by someone who has never heard of the university that issued them. The first cohort was 11 people. There was an anesthesiologist from Kharkiv who had not touched a laryngoscope in 5 years. There was a midwife from Asmara who had delivered 1,900 babies. There was a pediatrician from Maracaibo who had been managing a warehouse in Lowell and who cried in the intake meeting and then apologized in 3 languages for crying. Rasha Tarabishi runs it. She still works 2 clinical nights a week because she says an administrator who does not touch patients becomes a liar within 18 months. She holds a limited license now, under a state pathway that did not exist until Naomi Okafor and a retired judge and a disgraced logistics executive spent a year making phone calls, and it lets her stand at the table as a first assistant while she finishes the last of her examinations. Roth requests her. On the door of the program office, there is no plaque with a donor's name on it. There is a small brass lamp, 3 inches high, bolted to the wood at eye level, because Rasha thought a drawing would be too subtle and a photograph would be too much. She says the same thing to every incoming cohort on the first morning in a room with bad chairs and worse coffee. "You will be told to wait," she says. Wait for the exam cycle, wait for the verification, wait until your English is better, wait until you are less foreign. And you will want to wait, because waiting feels like planning. My teacher told me something in a basement with no electricity, and he was right about it, and then he died and could not enjoy being right. He said, "You don't wait for better light, you work with the light you have." I believed that for 20 years, and I was wrong about half of it. There is a second part, and he did not live long enough to say it, so I will. You work with the light you have. And then, when you finally have some, you do not stand there holding it. At the ribbon cutting, there were about 60 people, folding chairs, and a sheet cake from a supermarket. Bram Ostrander came because he had been invited, and stood at the back with his hands folded, and did not speak, and left before the cake. His daughter did not leave. Her name is Marit. She is 16 now, and she came up the aisle afterward with a flat package wrapped in brown paper and put it in Rasha's hands. It was the photograph, 4 by 6, creased in a cross, a small rusted pinhole in the top left corner, and a girl of 4 in a yellow shirt, squinting into the sun. Somebody had put it in a simple black frame. "He said it belongs with you," Marit said. Rasha Tarabishi held it for a moment with both hands, the way you hold something that has been in a bad place and come back. Then she hung it on the wall of the intake room at eye level, beside the chair where people sit down with their documents. It has no label. When somebody asks, and somebody asks almost every day, she tells them it is a photograph of a reason to fight, that everybody who walks through that door has one, and that the whole job is remembering to pin it where you can see it. Man, imagine standing in a room where every person has already decided what you are, based on 4 seconds of your voice, and knowing the entire time that one of them is only standing there because your hands were steady at 4 in the morning in a basement on the other side of the world. She never told him, she never needed to. The scar told him. If that got you the way it got me, hit that like button and share this with somebody who's had to start their whole life over from the bottom. They'll understand it faster than anyone. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because we tell them here every week. And be honest with yourself for a second. How many people have you walked past today whose real story you've never once thought to ask for?